Have you ever thought you knew everything about someone you loved only to discover you were living with a complete stranger? The day I found that janitor crying at my daughter's grave, everything I believed about my life, my family, and my role as a father shattered into a million pieces. I'm going to share with you the most painful, eye-opening experience of my entire existence, and I promise you by the end of this story, you'll question everything you think you know about the people closest to you. My name is Michael, and 3 months ago, I buried my only daughter, Emma. She was 23 years old, brilliant, beautiful, and according to everything I thought I knew, she was happy. But I was wrong. So devastatingly, completely wrong. The guilt I carry now is like a weight pressing down on my chest every single moment of every single day, making it hard to breathe, hard to think, hard to exist. I wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, replaying every conversation we ever had, searching desperately for the signs I missed, the cries for help I was too blind to see. My wife, Catherine, she's drowning in her own ocean of grief, and we can barely look at each other anymore because all we see reflected in each other's eyes is our failure. The funeral was on a Tuesday, a cold, gray Tuesday that matched the emptiness consuming my soul. The church was packed with people, colleagues from my law firm, Catherine's friends from her charity organization, Emma's classmates from university, her professors. Everyone kept telling us how wonderful she was, how bright her future had been, how tragic this loss was for everyone who knew her. But here's the thing that's been eating away at me like acid through metal. None of them really knew her either. They knew the version of Emma she showed to the world. The perfect daughter, the straight-A student, the girl with the radiant smile who volunteered at homeless shelters and tutored underprivileged kids on weekends. I stood there listening to person after person share their memories of my daughter, and with each story I felt more and more like a stranger at my own child's funeral. How could I have lived in the same house with her for 23 years and not known who she really was? The guilt started then, small at first, just a whisper in the back of my mind, but it grew louder and louder until it became a deafening roar that drowned out everything else. Catherine held my hand during the service, her fingers cold and trembling, and I remember thinking that we were both drowning, both gasping for air, but neither of us could save the other because we were both too far gone. Emma's best friend, or who I thought was her best friend, a girl named Sarah, gave a eulogy that made everyone cry. She talked about Emma's kindness, her infectious laugh, her dreams of becoming a human rights lawyer. But even Sarah's words felt hollow to me, like she was describing someone I should have known but didn't. After the funeral, we held a reception at our house, and people moved through our home like ghosts, their voices hushed, their faces painted with appropriate expressions of sympathy and sorrow. I locked myself in my study for a while, unable to face another person telling me how sorry they were, unable to accept another empty platitude about time healing all wounds. I sat in my leather chair, the one Emma used to curl up in when she was little and wanted to tell me about her day at school, and I sobbed like I've never sobbed before. The kind of crying that comes from somewhere so deep inside you that it feels like your very soul is trying to escape your body. I cried for my daughter, for the relationship we never really had, for all the moments I was too busy working to notice she needed me. I cried for the conversations we never had, the advice I never gave, the comfort I never provided. My phone kept buzzing with messages, condolences from people who barely knew us, and I wanted to throw it against the wall, wanted to scream that their words meant nothing, that nothing could fill the void Emma left behind. But I didn't. I just sat there, paralyzed by grief and guilt, wondering how I was supposed to go on living in a world without my daughter. The weeks after Emma's death blurred together into one continuous nightmare that I couldn't wake up from no matter how hard I tried. Catherine moved through the house like a ghost herself, barely eating, barely sleeping, barely speaking. We existed in the same space, but we weren't really together anymore. How could we be? Our daughter, the one thing that connected us, the one thing we'd created together, was gone. And in her absence, we had to face the uncomfortable truth that maybe we didn't really know each other either. Maybe our entire marriage had been built on the foundation of raising Emma, and now that she was gone, there was nothing left to hold us together. I threw myself back into work earlier than anyone expected, ignoring the concerned looks from my partners at the firm, ignoring the whispered conversations that stopped when I entered a room. I needed the distraction, needed something to focus on other than the crushing weight of my grief and guilt. But it didn't work. Even in the middle of depositions and client meetings, my mind would wander back to Emma, to all the times I'd chosen work over her, all the school plays I'd missed, all the parent-teacher conferences I'd sent Catherine to alone, because I had an important case. The word important now felt like a sick joke. What could possibly have been more important than being there for my daughter? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. But I'd convinced myself that providing for my family, giving them a beautiful home and financial security, was the same as being present. I was such a fool. One night, about 6 weeks after the funeral, I found myself in Emma's room, something I'd been avoiding because I knew it would destroy me. Catherine had left everything exactly as it was, and walking in felt like stepping into a time capsule. Her laptop was still on her desk, closed, but probably still containing all her secrets, all the parts of her life she never shared with us. Her bed was made with the same purple comforter she'd had since high school, the one with tiny white stars that she insisted she wasn't too old for. Her bookshelf was crammed with novels, textbooks, journals. I picked up one of the journals, my hands shaking, debating whether I had the right to invade her privacy even in death. In the end, I couldn't do it. I put it back, feeling like even that small gesture of respect was too little, too late. I lay down on her bed, breathing in the faint scent of her shampoo that still lingered on her pillow, and I talked to her like she was still there. I apologized for everything I'd done wrong, for every time I'd been too tired to listen, for every time I'd dismissed her feelings because I was stressed about work. I promised her that I would figure out what happened, why she'd felt so hopeless that she'd taken her own life. Yes, that's how my beautiful, brilliant daughter died. She took a bottle of sleeping pills and just never woke up. No note, no explanation, no goodbye. Just silence. The coroner said it was quick, that she wouldn't have suffered. But how could that possibly bring me comfort? My daughter suffered enough in her life to want to end it, and I was too blind to see it. I started visiting Emma's grave every day after work, sometimes staying until the cemetery staff would politely suggest it was time to close the gates. There was something peaceful about being there, surrounded by death, where I didn't have to pretend to be okay, or put on a brave face for anyone. I could just be a broken father mourning his daughter. The grave was in a beautiful spot under an old oak tree, and Catherine and I had chosen a simple but elegant headstone with Emma's name, her dates, and the inscription, "Beloved daughter, forever in our hearts." Every time I read those words, I felt like a hypocrite. How could she be in our hearts when we never really knew what was in hers? I would sit on the grass next to her grave, sometimes talking to her, sometimes just sitting in silence, feeling the weight of my failure pressing down on me. Other families would come and go, bringing flowers, saying prayers, and I would watch them, wondering if they were better parents than I was, if they'd actually known their loved ones before losing them. One afternoon, an elderly woman placing flowers on a nearby grave noticed me and came over. She introduced herself as Margaret, said her husband was buried 3 plots over, and that she'd been coming every week for 5 years since he passed. We talked for a while, and she said something that stuck with me. The hardest part isn't that they're gone. It's wondering if we loved them well enough while they were here. Her words cut through me like a knife because that was exactly what I was grappling with. Did I love Emma well enough? Did I show her often enough how much she meant to me? Or was I so caught up in my own world, my own ambitions and stress and problems that I failed to give her what she really needed? Margaret must have seen the pain on my face because she squeezed my shoulder gently and said, "The fact that you're here, that you're asking these questions, means you loved her. Give yourself some grace." But I couldn't. I didn't deserve grace. I deserved this pain, this guilt, this endless torment of not knowing why my daughter chose death over life. The cemetery became my refuge, the one place where I felt close to Emma, where I could pretend that somehow she could hear me and maybe, just maybe, forgive me for being such a terrible father. It was a Thursday afternoon, about 2.5 months after Emma's death, when everything changed. I'd left work early, telling my secretary I had a headache, which wasn't entirely a lie. I'd been having headaches constantly since Emma died, stress-induced tension that no amount of medication could fix. I drove to the cemetery on autopilot, not even really thinking about it, just knowing I needed to be there. The weather was starting to warm up, early spring pushing away the cold of winter, and there were flowers beginning to bloom on some of the graves. I parked my car in my usual spot and walked the familiar path to Emma's grave. But as I got closer, I saw something that made me stop in my tracks. There was someone there, A man kneeling at Emma's grave, and he was crying. Not just crying, but sobbing with the kind of raw, uncontrolled emotion that I recognized because I'd felt it myself so many times. My first reaction was confusion. Who was this man? I didn't recognize him from the funeral, and he wasn't dressed like he was visiting other graves nearby. He was wearing the tan uniform of the cemetery maintenance staff, his name tag identifying him as James, a janitor. A cemetery worker was crying at my daughter's grave, and nothing about that made sense. I stood there for a moment frozen, watching him, trying to understand what I was seeing. He was probably in his late 50s, weathered face, gray hair, hands that looked like they'd done hard labor for years. He had a small bouquet of daisies, Emma's favorite flowers, and he was placing them gently at the base of her headstone. How did he know daisies were her favorite? My heart started pounding in my chest, and 1,000 questions flooded my mind. I felt anger rising up inside me, hot and fierce. Who was this stranger? And what right did he have to cry at my daughter's grave? What connection did he have to Emma that I knew nothing about? I started walking toward him, my footsteps making noise on the gravel path, and he must have heard me because he quickly wiped his eyes and started to stand up. But I was already there, my shadow falling over him, and the words came out harsh and demanding before I could think better of it. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice sharp with emotion. "Why are you crying at my daughter's grave?" The man looked up at me, his face streaked with tears, and I saw fear flash in his eyes. He stood up quickly, awkwardly, like he'd been caught doing something wrong. "I'm sorry," he stammered, taking a step back. "I didn't mean to intrude, I knew her. I knew Emma." Those words hit me like a physical blow. He knew her. This janitor, this stranger I'd never seen before in my life, knew my daughter. "What do you mean you knew her?" I demanded, stepping closer to him, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. "How did you know my daughter?" He looked around nervously, like he was searching for an escape route, and for a moment I thought he was going to run. But then his shoulders sagged, and he met my eyes with a look of such profound sadness that some of my anger dissipated. "I'm James," he said quietly. "I work here, maintain the grounds, but before this job I used to be homeless. I lived on the streets downtown for 3 years." I stared at him, not understanding what any of this had to do with Emma. "What does that have to do with my daughter?" I asked, my voice softer now but still demanding answers. James took a deep breath, and tears started flowing down his face again. "Emma," he said, his voice breaking on her name. "She saved my life. Literally, saved my life. She found me on the street one night in the middle of winter, and I was dying. I'd given up. I wanted to die, but she wouldn't let me. She sat with me for hours in the freezing cold, talking to me, telling me that my life mattered, that I mattered. She came back every week after that, bringing me food, blankets, helping me get into rehab, helping me find this job. She gave me a reason to live when I had none. I felt like the ground was shifting beneath my feet. Emma did this? My Emma? And I never knew? When did this happen? I asked, my mind racing, trying to place this in the timeline of Emma's life. "About 2 years ago," James said. "I was at my lowest point. I'd lost everything, my family, my job, my home, my dignity. I was drinking myself to death on the streets and nobody cared. Nobody even looked at me. But Emma, she saw me, really saw me. Not as a homeless person, not as an addict, but as a human being who deserved compassion. I sank down onto the grass, my legs unable to hold me up anymore. 2 years ago, Emma would have been 21, in her second year of university. I remembered that year vaguely. I'd been working on the biggest case of my career, spending 18-hour days at the office, barely seeing my family. Catherine had mentioned something about Emma volunteering more, but I'd been too preoccupied to pay attention. "She never told me," I whispered, more to myself than to James. "She never said anything about this." James sat down too, maintaining a respectful distance, and he pulled out his wallet. From it, he extracted a worn, folded piece of paper. He handed it to me with trembling hands. "She gave me this," he said. "It's what kept me going during the hardest days." I unfolded the paper carefully, and my breath caught in my throat. It was a handwritten note in Emma's distinctive looping handwriting. "Dear James," it read, "you are worthy of love. You are worthy of happiness. You are worthy of a second chance. Your past does not define your future. Every day is a new opportunity to become the person you want to be. I believe in you. And I will keep believing in you until you can believe in yourself. Your friend, Emma. I read it once, twice, 3 times, and tears blurred my vision. This was my daughter. This compassion. This kindness. This absolute certainty that every human life had value. Where did she learn this? How did she become this person? And why didn't I know about it? She talked about you sometimes, James said softly, and my head snapped up. What did she say? I asked, desperate to know, even though I was terrified of the answer. James hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. She loved you, he said carefully, but she felt like you didn't really see her. She said you were always so busy, so focused on your work, that she felt invisible in her own home. She wanted to make you proud, wanted to show you that she was doing something meaningful with her life, but she was afraid you wouldn't understand. Each word was like a dagger to my heart. Did she tell you why she... I couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't say the words out loud. James shook his head. I didn't know she was struggling that much. She always seemed so strong, so together. She was the one helping everyone else. She volunteered at the homeless shelter 3 times a week. She tutored kids at the community center. She spent her weekends helping people like me get back on their feet. I thought she was happy. I thought she had everything figured out. I let out a bitter laugh. We all thought that. But we were all wrong, weren't we? She was crying out for help, and none of us heard her. James looked at me with understanding. I've been where she was, he said quietly. That dark place where you can't see any way out. Where the pain is so overwhelming that death seems like the only relief. When you're there, you get really good at hiding it. You smile, you help others, you put on a mask because you don't want to burden anyone with your darkness. You tell yourself that your pain isn't as important as other people's problems. I thought about all the times Emma had asked me about my day, listened to me complain about difficult clients and stressful cases, offered to help me with research or paperwork. She was taking care of me, and I never once thought to ask if she needed taking care of too. How did you find out she died? I asked James. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. I saw her obituary in the paper, he said. I couldn't believe it. I read it over and over, thinking there must be some mistake. Emma, with her bright smile and kind heart, gone? It didn't make sense. I came to the funeral but stayed in the back. I didn't think I belonged there, with all those important people. I'm just a janitor, and she came from a completely different world. But I've been coming to her grave every day since then, bringing daisies because she told me once that they were her favorite flower, because they were simple and pure, and didn't try to be something they weren't. I remembered Emma saying something similar to me once, years ago, when she was maybe 15 or 16. I'd bought Catherine an expensive bouquet of exotic flowers for our anniversary, and Emma had commented that she preferred daisies. I'd laughed it off, thought it was just teenage rebellion against anything her parents liked. But it was more than that. It was her trying to tell me who she was, and I hadn't been listening. Have you ever realized that you failed someone you loved more than life itself? Comment below if you've ever felt this overwhelming guilt. James and I sat there in silence for a while, 2 men bonded by grief for the same extraordinary girl. Finally, I found my voice again. Tell me more about her, I said. Tell me about the Emma you knew, please. James smiled through his tears, and over the next hour, he told me stories about my daughter that broke my heart and filled it with pride at the same time. He told me about how Emma would bring him coffee on cold mornings, always remembering that he took it black with 2 sugars. He told me about the night she found him passed out in an alley, how she'd called an ambulance and then stayed with him at the hospital, holding his hand while he detoxed, never once judging him or making him feel ashamed. He told me about how she'd helped him write a resume, even though he hadn't worked in years and had a criminal record for petty theft. How she'd personally called the cemetery director and vouched for him, convincing them to give him a chance. He told me about the other people Emma helped, a whole network of homeless individuals and recovering addicts who knew her as their angel, their savior, their friend. There was Marcus, a veteran with PTSD who Emma helped get into a VA program. There was Sophie, a young woman who'd aged out of foster care and ended up on the streets, who Emma tutored and helped get into community college. There was David, an elderly man who'd lost his family and his home to medical debt, who Emma visited in the nursing home where she'd helped him find a bed. She created this whole community, James said, his voice filled with awe. People who had nothing and no one, she brought them together. She organized weekly dinners at the shelter, not just serving food but sitting down and eating with everyone, listening to their stories, treating them like human beings instead of problems to be solved. She called it the circle of hope. Everyone was welcome, no judgment, no conditions, just compassion and community. I had no idea. None. While I was at my office, winning cases and making money, my daughter was out in the world actually changing lives, actually making a difference. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd always told Emma that she should study law, join my firm, make something of herself. And all along she was making something of herself, something far more meaningful than I'd ever achieved. Why didn't she tell me about any of this? I asked, though I already knew the answer. James looked at me with sympathy. She said you wouldn't understand. She said you measured success by money and status, and you'd think she was wasting her time with people who couldn't help her career. She was afraid you'd be disappointed in her. Those words shattered me. My daughter was afraid of my disappointment while she was out there being a literal angel to people in desperate need. What kind of father had I been, that my child feared my judgment more than she valued my support? I was so wrong, I whispered. About everything. I thought I knew what was important. I thought I was being a good father by providing for her, paying for her education, giving her opportunities. But she didn't need money or opportunities. She needed me to see her, to value what she valued, to support who she really was instead of who I wanted her to be. James nodded. She knew you loved her, he said. She told me that. But she also felt like your love was conditional, based on her meeting your expectations. She was exhausted from trying to be the daughter you wanted, while also being the person she needed to be for herself. I thought about all the conversations we'd had about her future, how I'd pushed her toward corporate law, prestigious firms, six-figure salaries. She'd gone along with it, enrolled in law school, got excellent grades, but now I realized it was all a performance, trying to make me happy while her true passion lay in helping the forgotten and marginalized. The cognitive dissonance must have been crushing. I spent the next several weeks tracking down the people James had told me about, wanting to understand this side of Emma I'd never known. It wasn't easy. Many of them were still homeless or living in transitional housing, and they were understandably wary of a stranger in an expensive suit asking questions. But when I mentioned Emma's name, their faces would transform. Marcus, the veteran, met me at a coffee shop near the VA hospital. He was a big man with kind eyes and scars that told stories of battles both overseas and internal. Emma changed my life, he told me simply. I came back from Afghanistan a broken man. I couldn't hold down a job, couldn't maintain relationships, couldn't sleep without nightmares. I ended up on the streets self-medicating with whatever I could get my hands on. I'd given up on the system, given up on myself. Then Emma found me during one of her outreach walks. She didn't try to fix me or save me right away. She just sat with me week after week listening, really listening. Not the way therapists listen, taking notes and analyzing, but the way a friend listens, with genuine care and interest. She made me feel human again. Marcus went on to tell me how Emma had researched VA programs specifically designed for homeless veterans, how she'd helped him navigate the bureaucratic nightmare of applications and appointments, how she'd gone with him to his intake evaluation because she knew he was terrified of being vulnerable in front of strangers. She saved my life, Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. And when I heard she'd taken her own life, I couldn't process it. Here was this person who dedicated herself to saving people like me, and she couldn't save herself. It didn't make sense, but it did make sense. In a horrible, tragic way. Emma had poured all her energy into others, using their pain to distract from her own. She'd become so good at being strong for everyone else that she'd forgotten how to ask for help for herself. Or maybe she'd tried, and we just hadn't heard her. Sophie, the young woman who'd aged out of foster care, was now working at a bookstore and taking classes at community college. She met me there during her lunch break, and we sat in the cafe while she told me her story. I was so angry when I ended up on the streets, Sophie said, stirring her coffee absently. I'd spent my whole childhood in the system, moving from home to home, never belonging anywhere. When I turned 18, they just cut me loose. No family, no support system, no safety net. I felt betrayed by everyone and everything. Emma found me sleeping in the park, and I was hostile toward her at first. I told her to leave me alone, that I didn't need another white savior trying to fix me. But she didn't leave. She didn't try to fix me either. She just asked if she could sit with me, and we talked. For hours. She told me about her own struggles, how she felt invisible in her own family, how she felt like she was never enough no matter what she did. I realized we weren't that different, her and me, both feeling lost and alone, just in different ways. Sophie showed me her notebook, filled with journal entries and essays from her classes. Emma helped me find my voice, she said. She encouraged me to write, to tell my story. She said that my experiences mattered, that my perspective was valuable. She helped me see that coming from nothing didn't mean I was nothing. She tutored me for my GED, helped me with college applications, came to my first day of classes to support me. She was more of a family to me than anyone had ever been. I listened to story after story like this. David, the elderly man in the nursing home, told me how Emma would visit him every Sunday afternoon, reading to him because his eyesight was failing, playing chess with him, just keeping him company when his own family had abandoned him. She had this way of making you feel seen, David said, his wrinkled hands clutching mine across the table in the common room. In a world that treats old people like we're invisible, like we're just waiting to die, Emma treated me like I still mattered. She'd ask my opinion on things, talk to me about current events, politics, philosophy. She stimulated my mind when everyone else just patronized me. Each person I talked to painted a picture of Emma that was simultaneously familiar and foreign to me. I recognized her compassion, her intelligence, her determination. Those were traits she'd shown at home too, but the depth of her commitment, the extent of her work, the impact she'd had on so many lives, that was entirely new to me. And the more I learned, the more the guilt consumed me. How had I been so blind? How had I lived in the same house with this extraordinary person and never really known her? The answer was simple and damning. I'd never really looked. I'd been too wrapped up in my own world to see what was happening in hers. I'd made assumptions about who she was and what she wanted, based on my own values and priorities, never bothering to ask if those aligned with hers. I'd been a father in name only, providing financial support while failing utterly in every other way that mattered. The breaking point came when I found Emma's actual journals. I'd avoided reading them at first, feeling like it was a violation of her privacy. But after talking to all these people who seemed to know my daughter better than I did, I needed to hear her voice, her truth, in her own words. I found them in a box under her bed, 5 thick journals spanning from when she was 18 until just days before she died. I took them to my study, locked the door, and started reading. The first journal was from her freshman year of college. The entries were mostly about typical college experiences, her classes, her roommate, parties she went to. But interspersed throughout were entries about me, about us, about her feelings of inadequacy and invisibility. Dad came to campus today to take me to lunch, one entry read. He spent the entire time on his phone, barely looking at me, taking calls from clients. When I tried to tell him about my philosophy class, the one I'm really passionate about, he cut me off to ask if I'd thought more about joining the pre-law society. I hadn't. I don't want to be a lawyer. I don't want his life. But I don't know how to tell him that without breaking his heart or making him disappointed in me. So I just nodded and said I'd think about it. I always say I'll think about it. It's become my default response to his expectations. I had no memory of this lunch. None. I'd probably gone straight back to the office afterward, checked it off my mental list of parental duties fulfilled, and moved on with my day, never realizing that my daughter had wanted something from me that I hadn't given her. My attention, my genuine interest, my unconditional support for her actual dreams instead of my projected ones. The journals progressed, and I watched Emma's inner life unfold on the pages. Her discovery of philosophy and ethics, her growing conviction that she needed to do something meaningful with her life, her first encounters with homeless individuals downtown that sparked her passion for service. I met a man today named James, one entry read. He was sitting outside the convenience store and everyone was walking past him like he didn't exist, like he was invisible. And I realized, that's how I feel sometimes. Invisible. Especially to Dad. He looks at me but he doesn't see me. He hears me talk but he doesn't listen. I wanted to help James not just because he needed help, but because I understood what it felt like to be unseen. When I sat down next to him and asked his name, the look of surprise on his face broke my heart. How long had it been since someone treated him like a person? How long has it been since Dad treated me like a person instead of a project or an extension of himself? Reading these words written in Emma's hand was like taking a knife to my chest and twisting it. This is what I'd done to her. Made her feel invisible, unheard, unseen. While I thought I was being a good father by setting high expectations and pushing her toward success, I was actually crushing her spirit, forcing her to hide her true self, making her feel like her real feelings and dreams didn't matter. The later journals became darker. Even as Emma's external work grew, helping more and more people, her internal struggle intensified. "I'm exhausted," one entry read. "I feel like I'm living two lives. There's the Emma that Dad wants, the law student with perfect grades who'll join his firm and make him proud. And there's the Emma I actually am, the one who'd rather spend her time at the shelter than in the library, who cares more about helping Sophie study for her GED than preparing for the bar exam. I'm tired of pretending, but I'm more afraid of disappointing him, of seeing that look in his eyes when he realizes I'm not who he thought I was. Sometimes I wonder what would happen if I just told the truth. Would he still love me? Or was his love always conditional on me being the daughter he wanted? My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the journal. She'd questioned my love for her. My own daughter had doubted whether I would love her if she was just herself. What had I done? How had I created an environment where my child felt she had to earn my love instead of knowing it was unconditional? The final journal was the hardest to read. The entries became sporadic, darker, filled with pain that she was clearly trying to hide from everyone around her. "I helped 3 people find housing this week," one entry read. "Marcus got into the VA program, Sophie aced her exam, and I connected another woman with a job opportunity. Everyone tells me I'm amazing, that I'm making such a difference. But inside, I feel empty. I pour myself into other people because it's easier than facing my own pain. When I'm helping someone else, I don't have to think about how lost I feel, how alone, how exhausted I am from pretending to be okay. Nobody knows how much I'm struggling. Not Dad, not Mom, not even my friends. I've gotten so good at wearing the mask that I'm not sure who I am without it anymore. Sometimes I think about what it would be like to just stop. To stop pretending, stop performing, stop trying to be everything to everyone. To just rest. Permanently. I had to stop reading, my vision too blurred with tears to see the words. Emma had been crying out for help in these pages, documenting her descent into depression and suicidal ideation, and no one knew. No one was reading these words. She was drowning, and she was drowning alone. The last entry was dated 3 days before she died. "I can't do this anymore." It read simply, "I've tried so hard to be strong, to be helpful, to make a difference, but I'm so tired. I'm tired of feeling invisible at home. I'm tired of pretending to want a career I don't want. I'm tired of carrying other people's pain while drowning in my own. I'm tired of feeling like I have to earn love and acceptance instead of just receiving it freely. I look at Dad and I see disappointment even when he's trying to hide it. I see his dreams for me and they're so far from my own dreams that I don't know how to bridge that gap. Mom tries, but she's so caught up in Dad's world, in being the perfect wife for the successful lawyer, that she doesn't really see me either. I'm so alone, surrounded by people who love the idea of me but don't really know me. And I'm so tired. Maybe if I'm gone, they'll finally see me. Maybe my death will matter more than my life did. Maybe then Dad will understand that he lost something real, not just the projection he created. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But I can't keep pretending anymore. I just want to rest." I closed the journal and sobbed. Great heaving sobs that came from the deepest part of my soul. My daughter had died thinking that her death would matter more than her life, that we loved an idea of her rather than her true self. And the most devastating part was that she was right. I had loved an idea, a projection, the daughter I wanted rather than the daughter I had. I'd been so focused on molding her into my image of success that I'd never stopped to appreciate the extraordinary person she already was. Emma didn't need to become anything. She was already remarkable, already making more of a difference in the world than I ever had. But I'd been too blind to see it, too caught up in my own ego and ambitions to recognize that my daughter had found her calling, and it was beautiful and meaningful and important, just not in the way I'd defined those terms. I'd failed her in every way a parent can fail a child. I'd made her feel invisible, unheard, unloved for who she truly was. And now she was gone, and I would never have the chance to tell her that I was wrong, that I was so incredibly wrong about everything. I would never get to tell her that she was enough, more than enough exactly as she was. I would never get to apologize for making her feel like she had to earn my love or meet my expectations. I would never get to support her real dreams, celebrate her actual achievements, see her for who she truly was instead of who I wanted her to be. The guilt was crushing, suffocating, unbearable, but I deserved every ounce of it. In the weeks that followed, I made a decision. I couldn't bring Emma back, couldn't undo the damage I'd caused or the pain she'd endured, but I could honor her memory by continuing her work, by being the person she needed me to be, even though it was too late for her. I reached out to everyone Emma had helped, to James and Marcus and Sophie and David and dozens of others. I told them I wanted to establish a foundation in Emma's name, dedicated to helping homeless individuals and supporting vulnerable youth aging out of foster care. I used my legal skills to set up the nonprofit, handle the paperwork, navigate the regulations. I donated a substantial amount of my own money to get it started, money that suddenly felt meaningless compared to the work it could do. Catherine joined me in this effort, and working together on something meaningful, something connected to Emma, helped bridge the gap that had formed between us. We started volunteering at the shelter where Emma had spent so much time. We attended the Circle of Hope dinners, sitting with homeless individuals, listening to their stories, treating them with the dignity and respect Emma had shown them. We established a scholarship fund for youth like Sophie, helping them pursue education and escape the cycle of poverty and homelessness. We created a mentorship program, pairing volunteers with individuals who needed support and guidance. Every decision we made, we asked ourselves, what would Emma do? How would Emma handle this? Her compassion, her vision, her belief in the inherent worth of every human being became our guiding principles. And slowly, painfully, we began to understand the daughter we'd lost. The people whose lives she'd touched became our teachers, sharing memories and lessons that Emma had taught them. James became involved in the foundation, using his experience to help us understand the real needs of homeless individuals, cutting through bureaucracy and assumptions to get to practical solutions. Marcus led support groups for veterans. Sophie started writing a blog about her experiences, inspiring other foster youth. David, despite his age, volunteered at the foundation office, greeting visitors with warmth and wisdom. Emma's circle of hope expanded, not just in size but in impact. We formed partnerships with other organizations, advocated for policy changes, raised awareness about homelessness and its root causes. Every person we helped, every life we touched, became a living memorial to Emma. And through this work, I began to change. The priorities that had once seemed so important, the cases, the billable hours, the prestigious reputation, faded in significance. I scaled back my hours at the firm, eventually taking a leave of absence to focus on the foundation full-time. My partners were surprised, probably disappointed, but I didn't care. For the first time in my adult life, I was doing work that actually mattered, work that made a real difference in real lives. I was becoming the father Emma had needed, even if she wasn't here to see it. Sometimes, when I'm at the shelter or visiting someone who's struggling, I feel her presence. Not in any supernatural sense, but in the way her philosophy and values guide my actions. I hear her voice in my head, gentle but firm, reminding me to listen more than I talk, to suspend judgment, to see the person behind the circumstances. And I realized that Emma's life mattered enormously. Her death was a tragedy, a preventable loss that will haunt me until my own last breath. But her life, her work, her compassion, those things have created ripples that continue to spread, touching more lives than she probably ever imagined. I still visit Emma's grave regularly, and James is often there too. We've become friends, unlikely as that might seem, bonded by our love for the same remarkable woman and our shared determination to honor her legacy. Sometimes other people Emma helped will show up, leaving flowers or notes, sharing new developments in their lives. Her grave has become a gathering place, a reminder of what one person's compassion and commitment can achieve. One day, about 6 months after that first encounter with James, I was sitting by Emma's grave when a young woman approached hesitantly. She looked to be about Emma's age, and she was carrying a daisy. "Excuse me," she said softly. "Are you Emma's father?" I nodded, and she knelt down to place the flower on the grave. "I'm Rebecca," she said. "Emma tutored me 2 years ago. I was failing out of school, dealing with a lot of family issues, and I was thinking about dropping out. Emma wouldn't let me. She spent hours with me every week, not just helping with homework, but listening to my problems, encouraging me to keep going. Because of her, I graduated. I just got accepted to nursing school. I wanted to tell her, to thank her." My throat tightened with emotion. "She would have been so proud of you," I managed to say. Rebecca smiled through her tears. She used to tell me that education was power, that knowledge could open doors that nothing else could. She made me believe in myself when no one else did. I want to be a nurse who works with underserved communities, helping people the way Emma helped me. Is that okay? To want to be like her? I stood up and hugged this young woman I'd never met before, this stranger who'd been touched by my daughter's light. It's more than okay, I told her. It's exactly what she would have wanted. We stood there together for a while, sharing memories of Emma, and I realized something profound. Emma wasn't really gone. Yes, her physical presence was absent, the loss of her irreversible and agonizing, but her spirit, her values, her impact, those things were very much alive. In James, who now had a purpose and a reason to stay sober. In Marcus, who was helping other veterans find their way back. In Sophie, who was breaking the cycle of poverty and showing other foster youth that a different future was possible. In David, who spent his final years giving back instead of giving up. In Rebecca, who would become a nurse dedicated to serving those who couldn't afford care. And in me, a father transformed by grief and guilt into someone who finally understood what really mattered in life. Emma had created a legacy of compassion and service that would outlive us all. And I had been given a second chance, not with her, but to honor her by becoming the person she'd needed me to be, to see people the way she saw them, with empathy and without judgment, to use my privilege and resources not to accumulate more for myself, but to help others rise, to measure success not by money or status, but by the positive impact I could have on other people's lives. Have you ever lost someone and only then realized how much you failed to appreciate them while they were alive? Please share your story in the comments. We all need to learn from each other's experiences. I know now that I failed Emma in so many ways. I was too busy, too focused on my own definition of success, too caught up in molding her into my image instead of celebrating who she actually was. I made her feel invisible when she deserved to be seen. I made her feel like she had to earn my love when it should have been freely given. I prioritized work over her, strangers over my own daughter, my ego over her emotional needs. These failures will haunt me for the rest of my life, and I deserve that haunting. But I also know that wallowing in guilt without action is just another form of selfishness. Emma didn't die to punish me, though her death certainly did that. She died because she was in unbearable pain and saw no other way out. And the best way I can honor her memory is to make sure that other young people in pain know they have options, have support, have people who see them and value them exactly as they are. The foundation we created in Emma's name has now helped hundreds of people. We've housed 47 homeless individuals, helped 23 youth aging out of foster care get into college or vocational training, provided mental health counseling to countless others struggling with depression and suicidal ideation. We've partnered with schools to create peer support programs where students can talk openly about mental health without stigma. We've trained volunteers to recognize signs of depression and to ask the hard questions that might save a life. We've created a crisis hotline specifically for young adults who feel invisible in their own families, who are struggling to live up to expectations that don't align with their true selves. Every person we help is Emma's legacy. Every life we save is a testament to her belief that every human being has inherent worth and deserves compassion. And every day, I try to be the father she needed, even though I can never be that for her now. I listen more than I talk. I ask questions and actually care about the answers. I support people's real dreams instead of projecting my own onto them. I see people, really see them, the way Emma taught me to through her example. Catherine and I have also changed our own relationship. We talk now, really talk, about our feelings, our fears, our regrets. We've started therapy together, working through the guilt and grief, learning how to be partners who actually support each other instead of just coexisting in the same space. We've realized that we never really knew each other either, that we'd both been so focused on our roles, successful lawyer, charitable socialite, perfect parents, that we'd forgotten to be real people with real vulnerabilities and needs. Emma's death shattered the illusion of our perfect life, but in the wreckage we've found the opportunity to build something more authentic, more meaningful. It's not easy. Some days the grief is so overwhelming that I can barely function. Some days I still find myself reaching for my phone to call Emma, to tell her about someone we helped, before remembering that she's not there to answer. Some nights I wake up sobbing, haunted by the journal entries, by the pain she was in, by the ways I failed her. But I keep going. For her. For the people who need help. For the second chance I've been given to live a life that actually matters. I've learned that being a good person, a good parent, a good human being isn't about having all the answers or being perfect. It's about being present, being genuine, being willing to really see and hear the people around you. It's about valuing people for who they are rather than what you want them to be. It's about understanding that success isn't measured in money or status, but in the positive impact you have on others. It's about recognizing that sometimes the people who seem the strongest, the most together, the most dedicated to helping others, are the ones who are silently drowning in their own pain. Emma taught me all of this through her life and tragically through her death. I wish I'd learned these lessons while she was alive. I wish I could tell her that I finally see her, finally understand her, finally appreciate the extraordinary person she was. I wish I could apologize for making her feel invisible and tell her that she was always enough, always more than enough. I wish I could support her real dreams and celebrate her actual achievements. I wish I could have been the father she deserved, but I can't. All I can do is honor her by being that person for others, by continuing her work, by making sure that her belief in the inherent worth of every human being lives on through the foundation and through my own transformed life. So if you're listening to this story, I want you to think about the people in your life. Really think about them. Are you seeing them for who they truly are, or for who you want them to be? Are you present with them, genuinely engaged, or are you distracted by work, by phones, by your own agenda? Are you making them feel valued and seen, or invisible and inadequate? Don't wait until it's too late to really know the people you love. Don't let guilt be your teacher the way it was mine. Learn from my mistakes. Be present. Listen deeply. Suspend judgment. Support people's real dreams, not your projected ones. Tell the people you love that they're enough, exactly as they are. Ask the hard questions about mental health and emotional well-being. Create an environment where people feel safe being vulnerable, where they don't have to wear masks or perform or earn love. Because here's the truth that I learned too late. The people who seem to have it all together are often the ones struggling the most. The people who spend their lives helping others are often neglecting their own needs. The people who smile the brightest are sometimes hiding the deepest pain. Pay attention. Really pay attention. It might save a life. It might save a relationship. It might prevent the kind of devastating loss and regret that I live with every single day. Emma's story didn't have to end the way it did. If I had been the father she needed, if I had really seen her and supported her and made her feel unconditionally loved, maybe she'd still be here. Maybe she'd be running the foundation herself, helping even more people, living the meaningful life she dreamed of. I can't change the past, but maybe by sharing this story, I can help change someone else's future. If this story has touched your heart, if it's made you think about your own relationships and priorities, please leave a like. Your engagement helps this message reach more people, and maybe, just maybe, it will prevent another family from experiencing the kind of loss that destroyed mine. Comment below about how this story impacted you, about changes you want to make in your own life, about people you need to really see and appreciate. Let's create a community of people committed to being present, being genuine, being compassionate. Subscribe to Through My Eyes for more stories that will challenge you, move you, and hopefully inspire you to live more authentically and love more deeply. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story. And most importantly, go tell someone you love that they matter to you exactly as they are. Don't wait. Don't assume they know. Tell them today. Because tomorrow isn't guaranteed, and you don't want to spend the rest of your life living with the kind of regret that consumes me every single day. Thank you for listening to my story, for witnessing my pain and my transformation. Emma would have wanted her story to help others, to prevent other young people from feeling so invisible and alone that death seemed like the only option. So please, carry her message forward. See people. Really see them. It matters more than you'll ever know.